there are hundreds of millions of people with neurodegenerative diseases. It's costing the world $2.6 trillion economically to deal with the neurodegenerative disease, and these problems are just growing.
Welcome to Startup Health TV, where we celebrate the entrepreneurs and the innovators who are transforming health. I'm Logan Plaster with Mark Edwards, CEO and co-founder of ViewMind. Mark, great to see you.
Good to see you.
A special interview because you're new to the startup health ecosystem, and so you're going to get to educate our viewers at the same time you tell me all about ViewMind. But let's start with the challenge. Every founder, every startup needs a pain point that they're addressing. So what was it that was broken in healthcare that made you decide to jump in?
Well, I think, and I'm sure I don't need to convince people too much of this, but there is a huge problem with brain health in general in the world. There are 1 billion people with mental health disorders. There are hundreds of millions of people with neurodegenerative diseases. It's costing the world $2.6 trillion economically to deal with the neurodegenerative disease and $3 trillion a year to deal with the mental health disorders. And these problems are just growing. We know that mental health is on the increase for a whole variety of reasons. I'm sure everybody would have a perspective about. And in terms of neurodegenerative disease, one of the big challenges we have is that the population is aging. In 15 years' time, there will be 40% more people who are the age of 50 and above. And people are also living longer. So I think by 2040, lifespans will have increased about 5 years. Dementia and Alzheimer's doubles every 5 years beyond the age of 65. So a whole ton of issues that need addressing.
How did you come across these issues? Is this personal for you?
It is personal for me. I did have my grandmother suffered from Alzheimer's. And there's other family members who've had other issues. So it is personal, and I also felt that when I came across the technology, the actual technology journey for ViewMind started 23 years ago, before the company formed. So the company's been around just over 6 years. But when I came across the initial technical founder, I thought, wow, this is something that really needs to be taken global, and it needs to be impacting and benefiting the lives of millions and millions of people. And that's something I know how to do. I've done that a number of times with different companies. At Microsoft, I headed up the Windows business there in UK and Ireland in its formative stage. And I've worked at various other companies where we've seen very rapid growth. So
you knew your sweet spot was bringing technologies to market. You found this technology. You said, this needs to be taken to the world, and I can do it. Okay, so what is ViewMind?
ViewMind is a technology. You could think of it as like the world's first very precise brain meter.
Brain meter.
We can actually measure functionally the health of the brain. We can measure small changes taking place functionally in the brain, and we can do that repeatedly. And so you can imagine if you have a meter that can do that, there's a whole raft of things that would enable. So dealing with people with diagnosing even from basic cognitive impairment. 92% of people with cognitive impairment don't get diagnosed, for example. There's a recent survey in the US with that result. There's all sorts of issues in terms of discriminating between different conditions and so on. So there are many, developing drugs. If you don't have a good sensitive measure that can give you a readout quickly when there's an effect of the drug on the brain functionally, how are you going to develop drugs quickly and efficiently? Yeah. Well, we don't today, and especially in the neuro area, it's a big problem.
So what's the underlying technology? Because we have lots of folks who are sort of taking their own stab at that issue.
Yes, our approach is really quite unique, and it's based on eye movement responses to visual stimuli. So what we do is we expose the eye to a visual stimulus in a headset, let's say a VR headset. This activates different neural networks in the brain. We know which networks are being activated and when they're being activated. We know which eye movements should be occurring at different stages of the exercise. We gather and digitize all of that information, and we analyze it using our machine learning algorithms, and it enables us to get a very, very precise readout of exactly the health of different areas of the brain at that point in time. And it's repeatable. And, if somebody is having an intervention, a medication, we can measure and see the impact. And it could be used, also I think one of the other things is that this isn't just neuro and brain. the brain is the apex organ of the human body. Every aspect of health has some manifestation in terms of functional health.
Okay.
The cardiovascular function, your lungs, diabetes, all of these things.
So this VR-based sort of methodology is just a window into all sorts of other ways of measuring physical health.
Yeah, so we're basically, it's all based on eye movements, and the eyes, what we've really discovered and developed a lot of science around is the idea that the eye works in a very autonomic, very specific way. It's a highly optimized system for gathering visual information. And so, in the brain, in the eye, the visual cortex has two functions. One is to identify a point and encode information, visual information from that point for as long as it needs to encode, whilst in parallel, your peripheral vision is scanning the scene to work out the next point that has information that you should go to next. And you're continuously making these jumps. And we've defined some 200 different metrics that we use that have signal and information to inform us about what's going on in different areas of the brain.
Fascinating. Okay, so where are you at in your development? I mean, obviously you have to really go through a rigorous process of proving out the efficacy and the accuracy of something like this.
Well, the actual science has been validated over a long period of time. We've done many clinical studies. We have regulatory approval in certain markets now.
Okay.
For example, in Latin America, in Brazil, in Malaysia, in Europe. We're going through an FDA process right now. We're expecting to do a filing in the middle of next year.
I'm sure it's no side effects. I'm sure it's a
Safe,
low impact.
It's low impact, and I think one of the things that is really unique is that we're also our technology, as well as having very high sensitivity, it has incredibly high specificity.
Really?
And very high specificity. And so one of the things that we are doing is we're also validating against structural tests, some of the gold standard structural tests, things like MRI, PET scans, blood assays, and so on.
Yep.
We're part of a large landmark study called Biohermes 2, run by GAP, the Global Alzheimer's Prevention. And we're going to be comparing with over 1,000 people who've had, in 30 hospitals, who've had PET scans for tau and amyloid deposits, blood testing, and lots of different MRI.
Amazing. How is the Alzheimer's, just to take one community, how is the Alzheimer's community responding to this?
Well, we're working with some very leading doctors.
Do you ever get pushback of like, this is one of those technologies that feels too good to be true? Are you like kind of ahead of the curve that way? Does that ever happen, or is it being accepted?
It has happened to a degree, at certain times. We are working with some of the world's leading authorities, doctors in this area. For example, Dr. Francisco Lefera, who unfortunately recently passed away, but he was a leading authority in this area. And so we've built up a lot of data, a lot of evidence. I mean, at the end of the day, data is really the thing that people want to see. And the results speak for themselves. I mean, we're about to publish a study. We presented the preliminary results, but it's looking at asymptomatic Alzheimer's patients in blind studies, one in a familial and a genetic cohort, and another in a sporadic cohort, so it was a general Alzheimer's. So we know that these individuals have the hallmarks of Alzheimer's. They're carrying amyloid proteins in the brain in certain areas. And we could show in the asymptomatic stage blindly a sensitivity of 96%.
Wow.
And a specificity of 98%, which is incredible. That's in the genetic population. The exact same product was used in the sporadic population, and we got 95% area under the RUT curve, which is a approximation for sensitivity and specificity.
So I'm not an expert in this area, so just to help me understand, there are some tests that might show you a visual of the brain where you might see a plaque or but you're not talking, but a VR headset would show you the presence of something versus you're not going to map it to a visual of the brain, are you? Or do you?
So really what we're doing is we're measuring the brain functionally. So we're looking at function, memory, different kinds of memory, short-term memory. We're looking at working memory, executive functions, reaction times, attention, selective attention, sustained attention, all kind of different cognitive functions.
Okay.
But the technology is so sensitive. What we've been able to show with hypothesis-generating data is that we correlate with structural tests for the brain,
Okay.
which are things like what you just mentioned,
EEG,
EEG, imaging, type of data, MRI, and so we've done publications. Yes, so I think actually we're not trying to replace those structural tests. They'll always be done. You'll always do MRIs or blood testing. But if we can do a very precise functional test and you can put the two together and know that they correlate, then that is a game changer for this whole space. Then you have a very, very powerful solution that moves things substantially forwards.
It's very exciting, Mark. Well, I appreciate you taking the time with me to explain what you're building. This is an exciting moment in Alzheimer's and neurodegenerative diseases, between technology for diagnosing and the prognostic diagnosis and treatment and imaging. This is an amazing time. So I appreciate it.
All right. Thanks again.
Wish you the best.
Yeah, thank you.